Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tombstone Tuesday. Now, this is the first time I have hosted a podcast that was a video podcast. So I'm really excited about this show. I had a great guest, so that really made it go well. Now, the guest I have, she has a book coming out about cemetery history, and we covered a lot of interesting topics, including, jewelry made from human hair. If you want to see all the things we touched on, I will have timestamps down in the description so you can kind of see all the different topics that we talked about. And then at the end, I'm going to have a couple little bloopers because there was some funny, little bits and bobs behind the scenes. But of course, the biggest blooper is that my banner up there that says Tombstone Tuesday is reversed because I didn't completely understand the settings in Zoom. So, hey, live and learn. I'll get better with each show, I'm sure. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Thanks. Okay, so if you're ready, are you ready, Miss Teal?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. I'll give myself a little space so I can clip it out. Ooh, get my glasses down. All right, so welcome to Tombstone Tuesday, everyone. And before I bring on today's guest, I just want to say that point out the little virtual background I have going on with Zoom. And I want to see if anybody knows where that is. This is one of my favorite burial grounds ever. I do talk about it a lot. And maybe some of you have been there too and you recognize it. If you do, let me know in the comments below, or just take a wild guess. I don't care. It's worth, why not? There's no prizes, but hey, just take a guess. Okay, so I am so excited about today's guest. Many of you already know her, but for those who don't, I'm going to give you a very brief description because she is involved in so many different things, and it would just be confusing if I told you everything she's involved in, but she does a lot of stuff. So her name is Teal Gray, and she is a mysterious sacred site traveler, a best-selling author, and ordained non-denominational minister. And I've actually seen her in her robes. It's really cool. Now, Teal loves to learn. She is a certified holistic health practitioner. She's also a member of the American Association of Drugless Practitioners. And, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Like I said, I could go on and on. But Teal loves to learn. And she has studied so many different things and is continuing to study them as well. Now, many of you watching this today probably know Teal through her unique intuitive gifts, or maybe you bought some of those special products that she offers over. She created a whole line of really cool products that, we could do a whole show just talking about that. It's called the Lavender Crow. And don't worry, I'll put links to everything below. But one thing I was realizing as I was preparing for today's show is that Teal really has one of her unique gifts is she's really good at bringing kindred spirits together. Like she's really good at bringing a group of people together who might not have met each other otherwise. And I just think it's one of her special gifts that maybe she doesn't even think consciously about because she just does it so naturally. But anyway, this show is Tombstone Tuesday. So I have brought Teal Gray here today to talk about cemetery history, especially a cemetery history book that she has coming out this fall. And I can hardly wait to read it. I hope I get an advanced review copy because, woof, I can hardly wait. It's called Forget Me Not, Memento Mori, A World View. And I'll have links to all things Teal below, so don't worry about remembering the title offhand. And so you can get ready for that book too. So yeah, hey Teal, how are you doing today?
Hello. How are you, Tui? Great to be here. Always love to get to chat with you.
I know, it's fun. It's fun. You're always so busy. I'm glad I got you on the show so I get to have you to myself for a little while. Now, before I dive into the official interview, there is something I was thinking about this. I really need to thank you. We met at an event several years ago, and shortly after that, you invited me to be on your radio show, which was pretty new experience for me, and I loved it. And so then after a while, I ended up, you invited me to be your co-host. And I loved that too. And we had so much fun. And then we both, we did that for a few years, and then we both got super busy with other stuff. And then a couple months ago, I hadn't been podcasting for a while, and you got me back into it. Like, I wouldn't be doing Tombstone Tuesday. I realized I wouldn't even be doing this show if it weren't for you and the encouragement you've given me and all that you really showed me, like, how to get going on this whole podcast journey. So I just wanted to say thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And you're really gifted at it. I love it. I love the videos. And I just, it's been such a fun kind of journey that we've been on with this. And I just thought, oh, she's going to be great at this. And it turned out to be true. So you're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Well, thanks. I just really appreciated that. And I wasn't sure if I had really said that, specifically. Sometimes you have those thoughts and, you forget to say them. So there you go. All right. So, I think for those who don't know, aren't familiar with the term Memento Mori, we better have you define it for us.
Well, Memento Mori is something that became, wildly popular in the Middle Ages, and we'll talk about dates and all that kind of stuff later on. But Memento Mori literally means remember you must die. Remember you are mortal. And it's something that I think in this day and age, we have come to another major with this pandemic situation to where it's very much on the forefront of everyone's mind. In the Middle Ages and different times, periods through history, there have been times that it was more popular than others, but certainly it was even in the 16th century, before that, all of that, there's been milestones where it was more used. But in ancient Rome, the Romans would have their pages, their boys, if you will, after a battle, when they had a victory, they would have them call out and chant behind them. Even though they were celebrating a major war battle victory, they still had somebody behind them chanting, Memento Mori, remember,
Wow.
You're mortal, you must die. And so it's something that has, been woven through history, in battles, in personal just life, and as mementos for people, a last little bit of something tangible, a lock of hair, something like that from a loved one that they'll never be able to touch or hold in life again. So, it's got a deep meaning, and it also has been part of everybody's history. And I don't even think they know it, that they would have clocks, and it would be part of it to, written in Latin, time flies. And it's the same thing. It was a version of Memento Mori that and it would have the skeletons. You'll see them a lot in Germany, a lot of the old world, where they have these amazing, beautiful clocks that are in the city square, and it'll have time flies, and they'll have a skeleton with a, ready to chop you up and take you onto the other side, that rings on every hour. So it's been a forefront, and so much so that it becomes the background. Sometimes something can be so woven into people's lives that it becomes a background. And while it's always been there, there are times, if it's oh gosh, there's been, the Black Death, there's been, famine, there's been so many different things through history. And then it pops up into something to where people have more jewelry pieces made. They'll have wall art made. There's a subgenre of it called a Dance of Death. And that was something that they wanted to make sure that you understood life was essentially like a vanity. And so they had pictures that had skulls. They would have the hourglass, different things there, so that you remembered, and people had them all in their houses just to remind them, enjoy this day. You don't know if you have tomorrow. And the Dance of Death became popular. It was plays about that, especially during the time of the plague, and that they wrote so many songs and different things. And it was something to where you'll see these pictures, and there's some of the work that I own that you have the pictures. I know you're going to put up for everybody, and you'll see a skeleton dancing with, sometimes they'll have a king, and then they'll have paupers and children, they'll have old women, and they have them all together marching with these dancing skeletons off to death, to make you also remember that no matter what your status in life, you will all go out together, and death doesn't play favorites. So you're going to be cast down, if you're a king, as quickly as if you're a pauper. So that it had a lot of social meaning, as well as, just something spiritual to think about.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I like what you said about something being so part of the foreground that it becomes part of the background. Anyway,
Yeah.
I might have been spacing out for a second when you said that. So I was like, oh, that is a little nugget. I'm glad we're recording this, because I'm going to think back on that a little bit. I like that
There's
idea.
a teal nugget for you.
Yes, a little teal nugget. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Well, now, I know that you give lectures about
Yeah.
Memento Mori history, and you've also got your own personal collection of Memento Mori items. And I'm just curious, like how did you decide to become a collector, or what was involved, or did you even decide, did these things find you? I mean, what was that whole process where, like, hey,
that's really what it was. A piece found me. I was one of those people before that, I guess you have to say life before Memento Mori for me, life after Memento Mori for me, because I was a little, maybe because I am a sensitive and everything, when I touch objects, or they can just speak to me psychically, I can pick up on the people or their life, even if it's an inanimate object or a building or anything. So I just always kind of kept at everything like that at arm's length, because I have to shut down sometime. You can't just stay
definitely
open. People think that, they'll ask me like, oh, this, must be something that you just 24/7. I'm like, you would go crazy. You could not do that 24/7, But I was one of the people who, now I think, oh, what are you nervous about? But I was one of those people who thought, I don't know. I mean, that's somebody's very personal, that's their hair, that's their DNA. That I think I can leave that alone. And then there was this piece, this first piece, and it's a beautiful, beautiful ring that is completely woven out of hair, and it has the tiniest little buckle. It looks like, like you're wearing a little belt around your finger. And it's really absolutely stunningly amazing, the work, the artistry, because I'm also an artist. So I appreciate, even if it's something that might not be my thing, I can appreciate the artistry that went into it. And all these different pieces really speak to me in the collection, which I have over 100 pieces now.
Oh,
but that first piece, I thought, oh, it's just beautiful. I picked it up, and it didn't so much speak to me, really like specific names or anything, but I could sort of see the generational pieces, of hair woven in that. And then come to find out, that was a piece where several family members had died, and they wove both of their hairs together in that.
Oh.
And so it has a beautiful, and then I realized from that moment, it wasn't at all anything to be, a little bit squeamish about, because that was people's lives, and I really respect it. And then now I've become sort of very protective of these pieces, and sometimes I'll buy something, even if it's extravagantly expensive or needs a little work or it's not perfect, just because I want it to take care of it, and I don't, it's a special thing with who it's attached to, and I don't necessarily want it to just be with anybody, So I find that each piece becomes really personal, and when you have a lot of them, that gets to be really interesting. And I have two really very rare buttons, because that was not something they did very often. Buttons, I mean, there are some, but let's say you'll see 100 watch fobs, bracelets, pins, and two, maybe one, if that, button. And so those are very rare. And you
Would
know, I
these
just have,
buttons be used on garments then that people
yes,
wore?
they would be. Yeah, they would be made specially to, you know, because the mourning clothes, the whole thing, it was a
Oh
whole thing.
yeah.
And usually you went into mourning for a year and you wore nothing but black. And
Hmm.
so these would be maybe a special sort of top button or something for
Hmm.
somebody. And you would be, you know, probably fairly well off to have one, because it would be something so intricate.
So would you have
And
made that yourself, or would you have had a special craftsperson who like maybe specializes in those make it for you?
jewelers.
Oh,
And
the
back
jewelers.
in the day, and in
Mhm.
Victorian times and everything, it was jewelers that
Oh,
made these, and which makes sense because they're used to working with such
that makes sense.
fine
The small,
thing,
fine
and
detail.
their
Okay.
little tools are so fine. And then, of course, they employ different artists and, you know, hair artists and things like that, because they're not just hair that's in something. You know, you will have some pieces that are more family made or made very simply as a memento, a keepsake, and the hair will just be tied with a ribbon or something. But the pieces that are, you know, very elaborate are woven. They're braided, and then some of
Yeah.
them are braided in a 3D method, and
I've
that's
seen some
really
of those.
interesting.
Those are amazing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard to
I
believe
have
that
a really
they hold
rare
up.
um, bracelet, yeah, with a locket on it
Oh,
from
wow.
Mayflower descendant, and it's 3D. So it is, it's braided, but it's braided, you know, where
Yeah.
there's like this whole life to it, and then those pieces are then braided, and
Wow.
put together with gold and everything, and so it's pretty amazing.
Boy, so now, was there a certain time period when making things with hair was more popular, or has that been a
Yeah,
component for centuries?
well, it has been a component for centuries, but the height of it, I don't think anybody can argue with. The absolute pinnacle was when the Queen lost
Yeah.
her beloved Prince Albert,
Hmm.
and the whole court, royal court, they were ordered to wear black and did, and but not just for a year, decades,
Yeah.
decades. And so all of these people were black, and they all had the jewelry made, and so you had earrings, you had, you know, watch fobs, you had bracelets, you had necklaces, you had brooches, pins, you know, some buttons, you name it. And then, of course, these fantastic wall art pieces that
Mm.
are just amazing. And of course, the art, you know, the art was very, very big. So Victorian times, that was, you know, that was really the big part of the big time for that. And in fact, so much so that there was, you know, timely. You got to think this stuff takes time. It's artistry. And there was like, I want to double check myself to see. Yeah, there was at the height of that when Queen Victoria had her court and everybody wearing it. And then, of course, everybody you know, in England wanted to be part of it if they possibly could in any way. And so they had to, the jewelers shipped in just in that time, the first part of that time period, 50 tons of human hair a year. They would import it from everywhere they could get it. And
Sheesh.
so that is per year, 50 tons. So what they would do with that is,
Wow.
no,
I
50
didn't know
tons,
that was
it's a
something they
lot. It's a
inherited.
lot.
I mean,
And there's
imported.
a huge process, a big
Oh.
process of processing the hair. You can't just take the hair and braid it. I mean, you
Oh.
could, but that's not how they did it. So there's a big process to making these pieces.
Well,
But
craftsmanship.
the, it's a lot of craftsmanship. And then the
Mhm.
reason that they had to import so much hair is because, you know, you didn't have enough necessarily from the person who passed to do maybe a piece or enough family pieces.
I
So
wondered
let's
about
say
that.
you
Like,
had a,
did they gather it
yeah,
while they were alive and keep it in a jar? You know, I mean, were they thinking
well,
ahead?
you know, you have some people that will keep locks of hair, but they didn't, you know, you just think even in that time they would keep a lock of hair or something, you know,
Yeah.
when a baby born or at a birth date, or oh, we're going to cut their hair, so we'll keep a
Yeah.
little. But they didn't, even though it was part of their life. Again, it became in the background, right? So
Yeah.
until you need it, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
And so let's just say you had 6 family members and you only had, you know, a lock of hair or a small amount of hair that you could get off of the body, right? That
Yeah.
you took. Well, it's going to take depending on the pieces they want, you know, you're going to have other hair to weave in
Oh.
with what you're doing.
Mhm.
And so also timely speed was part of it, to where they could have pieces with people. There's people who were Puritans about things, and they wanted only that person's hair, and that was that. And they just got what, you know, they made sure they had enough of it, and the jeweler made the piece. But there
Yeah.
were other people who were, you know, less fussy, if you will, to say, you know, the main component
Could be
obviously
mixed.
is my loved one, but you can mix it, if you know, with other hair that matches it. And so what they would do is they would have this human hair, and they would have it dyed in all these different batches of color.
Wow.
And so if somebody wanted something very elaborate and bigger piece, let's say, you know, they would then already have these pieces essentially made but not completed, so that
Wow.
when somebody died, instead of starting from scratch on
Mhm.
something that may take weeks, you know, or longer, you know, they would be able to do this something very quickly. And if they had to turn around and give it to you in a day or two or less than a week, they could do that. But without
Oh.
having 50 tons of hair a year, they couldn't keep the market fulfilled. So yeah, it was quite an industry.
It's really a lot to think about. Yeah, that is so fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say now, one thing that you and I both love, besides hair, we like our hair, but we also share a love of research. And I'm always really impressed by the genealogical research that you do. I haven't
Uh-huh.
done much, but I do end up speaking to a lot of genealogy groups because they get me. They understand why I would want to spend time in a cemetery. Um,
Right.
but you know, your family tree is just like so cool, and I am always so you always find the most interesting stuff. And like, you know, I remember pirates and things like that. You
Yeah,
know, you'll just
I
call them,
love my pirate.
but one time you called me up, and this was kind of a little bit of synchronicity because I was reading this book about headstone engravers in New England. I would
Yeah,
read a book about New Zealand, but I haven't found one. Anyway, I was reading about you know, the East Coast of America, the early 1700s, whatever. Some famous
carvers. Yeah.
engravers, carvers, and so I had all their names fresh in my head. And you just randomly called me up and you said, "Hey, I just found out that I am related to Obadiah Wheeler," and I'm like, "What? I know who that
Yeah.
is. I was reading a book
He's
about him. Tell us
yeah.
about him."
The, many people have books on their shelves about. He's my ninth
I do,
great grandfather,
of
and
course.
Obadiah Wheeler is very famous. He's considered the greatest craftsman for his time of the carvers, you know, of the
Yeah.
tombstones. And he also, art majors in college will also study my ninth great
Oh,
grandfather
how cool.
because of his artistry. And that's what made him, he was a trailblazer, if you will, at the time. And again, people took things very seriously. And he lived from, you know, in the 1700s. So in the 1700s, it was, Memento Mori was very much at its height. And you would have a lot of thought and work, if you, and the more you could afford the better, of a carver. And he was, again, you know, this is not just me bragging on him, it's, you could look him up, and
No,
he's
I mean, yeah,
considered the greatest
he's known.
carver of the eastern, yeah, Connecticut, of his time, of his day. And his thing was that the skull and crossbones, which were, you know, there was that, and then maybe they would do something that was a little bit of uh, not too frilly. So he took things and he made these beautiful rosettas, and then he took a face, instead of it always, some of his are flat, but he also was the first one to do them in relief, if you will, so 3D.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And so that was a whole nother thing, and brought a
yeah.
whole new dimension to the
Literally
tombstone.
brought a whole new dimension. Yeah.
Yeah, literally brought a whole new dimension. And his faces were beautiful. They were very refined because he was such a gifted carver. So he could make very beautiful detail and face work, and he did beautiful lettering that most people couldn't do, you know, on the tombstone. And he
Oh,
could
yeah.
do entire verses. He would do entire poetry, you know, poems would be on there, everything. but he took and made, instead of it just being, you know, wings or something, he made very elaborate wings. He made a lot of swirls and curls and rosettas and his footstones. That used to be something that was pretty basic or absolutely plain.
Mm-hmm.
And his footstones were just beyond gorgeous. And so you have, you know, probably I think there's 77 pretty famous, and that sounds like a lot, but you know,
There are a lot of people.
he did a lot of work. He did
Mhm.
you know, quite a lot of work through his lifetime. And there's a lot of, he's so famous that each of his stones has been researched, you know, to the nth degree, because people study that's part of their doctorate work, and
Mhm.
it's a big thing for them. So you can go to, you know, all these different cemeteries, and you can have a little map and find out exactly where his stones are and go and see them. And they really are, they're quite beautiful. And I know we had our trip cut short, obviously, and now we can't go right now, but you were going to go with me when I go up there and do my little pilgrimage, and I want to take some more stuff, and I'm going to do a book about him. And
Yeah,
because
that'll
I
be
have
great.
personal family stuff that are not in the, you know, the books that everybody has on their shelf. So I was going to do a little more personal book on him, and I wanted to take, you know, my own pictures, and it's going to take, you
Yeah.
know, we'll have to be there for a little while, you know, a week at least, and that's going at it quite briskly today
There's
to
a
get it
lot
up.
of stones to
Just
cover, a lot
a
of
lot
ground
of
to
stuff.
cover. Mhm.
Yeah. So I know you wanted to go up there. We were going to make that trip. So hopefully you
Yes.
can still go when I go.
I hope
And
so.
then also on the Mayflower, you know, my
Of
my
course.
12th great grandfather owned the Mayflower. He built
What?
it. He owned it and
Of
built it,
course.
and then yeah, he did. And that's, you know, I'm really proud of that, because everybody
Yeah.
who's been part of a descendant on the Mayflower, and I think maybe that's why that Memento Mori piece means a lot to me, is
Oh yeah.
because he owned it, he built it.
Wow.
And you know, then also my 11th great grandfather, William White, he was one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact, which was something
Oh.
they signed as they were coming over, sort of like their constitution, if you will. And he was very famous, obviously, you know, for that. And his wife Susanna, and their son, being there, Resolved was his son's name, their
Wow.
son's name. So there's a lot of book written about him, and Resolved White, and his son, and all of that. So he, you know, that's pretty just wonderful to have that. But the, you know, to on the other side of the family, it's through the, you know, the tree, but to have the grandfather that actually owned and built the Mayflower, that was pretty cool. And I do have ship captains and, you know, things that were part of the ships, and I love it. So that's great. You know, it's a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
it is really interesting.
Yeah,
Very fascinating. Now,
yeah.
your Memento Mori collection includes some really unique items that are associated with President Garfield, who was assassinated in 1881. And
Yeah.
I am interested, like, how did you were you particularly interested in him in particular? Or how did you get
You
into,
know,
branch out into that aspect of your Memento Mori?
I was, you know, it's that research bug. It's just like one more
Yeah.
leaf, right?
Uh,
And I don't, you know, I have pieces from other presidents. You know, I have
yeah.
small
I was
fragments
going to
from the
ask about that
wallpaper
too.
of
Yeah.
President's Lincoln. You know, they took Lincoln
Yeah.
to a room when he was shot, and he died there. And I have some small pieces of the wallpaper from where his bed had, you know, right there at his bed where he died.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, and I have McKinley's, a piece of McKinley's black draping material from his coffin.
Oh, wow.
I also have a piece of President Kennedy, his same thing, his draping material. I have, you know, there's a beautiful statue in Washington that they did of Martin Luther King Jr. And the sculptor, there were pieces, because it was such a beautiful kind of a blessed piece. He kept pieces of, as he was carving and sculpting, he kept little pieces from that memorial, and I have some of those pieces
Oh, wow.
of that. So that's kind of neat. And McKinley, I have his death ribbons and stuff like that. But Garfield was interesting because I started thinking about there's several presidents on there that had been assassinated,
Yeah.
and one, so it was like one of these things. And I was thinking about the assassinations, and I was like, how many people have been in it? And I realized, oh, Garfield, and
He's
I
easy to
had
forget
a
about.
piece. Yeah,
No?
and it's it's a shame because actually he was actually very beloved, if you will, at the time,
Yeah.
and he was shot in a railway
A
station,
train, yeah, yeah,
and
train ride.
and it was very. I mean, people, it's very publicly seen. So I have, from 1882, 1881 is when it happened, and so there were these engravings, these pieces of art, but it was done on an engraving kind of a thing, is the way they did their art then, and it would be mass produced in the newspapers or in magazines or something like that. But I have the original. I have 5 of the original carvings, engraving photo prints, if you will, from 1881, from all the different times, from when he was shot all the way through to his funeral and different things. And I have a eulogy signed by the
Oh,
man
yeah, I
who
saw
did the
that in your
eulogy.
collection.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
have that. I have a heart-shaped
A
metal
platter.
dish from his tomb souvenir, because he was so beloved. He
Ooh,
actually had tomb souvenirs that
wow.
people made and sold there. So
Mhm.
I have that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we really don't do these days. No matter how famous you are, you don't attend a funeral and come home with souvenirs. You might get
Souvenirs, but it
a
was a
death
big
card or
thing.
something.
It was such a
Yeah.
big thing to them that they marked it in such a great way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, now you have over 100 items, right, in your Memento
Yeah.
Mori collection. So it's really
Hmm.
now I'm curious because these are items, they're old and they could deteriorate. So
Yeah.
what sort of precautions do you have to take care of them?
You really do, because like anything else, you can love something, but if you don't take proper care of it, or it
Yeah.
gets bashed about, it's going to ruin. And some of these things, especially the grave
Here.
rubbings I have that are, very old, from Europe and different things, you have to keep those. I keep them in archival paper. So
Hmm.
you can look up, how do I store, antique books, and because I have things that are signed, I have rubbings and things like that, paper. So there's archival paper that historians and different people, they use to keep these safe, and you pack them up in that, and you keep them out of the sun. And
Yeah.
also, depending on the piece, depending on what it is, I care for it differently. I'll still use archival papers, even if it's on jewelry or things, just because it's just another element of something to wrap them in, that's not abrasive, and so I'll wrap those up and I'll store them in boxes. I have also cases that are made, because it is a traveling lecture that I do with a lot of these pieces. So I have different cases of different sizes, so they can be sort of in their own little spaces. But even in that, nothing's completely, dust proof, or bug proof, whatever. So I always am concerned. I have not, knock on wood, because I'm superstitious, um, have not had it happen, but I've always been afraid for some of these things that have material with them, that moths or something will get in
Oh,
there
yeah.
and damage it. So I keep little cedar chips in storage with them, and
Mhm.
keep them sealed up, and everything. So they're very cared for. And then of course, once you unpack it and it's all beautiful and laid out when people see the lecture. And I do let people touch the pieces too, which
Oh, really?
surprises them,
That
because
is
it's,
surprising.
they're, I think to myself, I have some such rare pieces that probably should be in a museum, but they're with me. And so I think, wouldn't it be great? And I know there's people who say, well, I wouldn't let them touch them because that's not good. But at the same time, this is something a little bit specialized. And I think if you could just see the people who come in, some curious, some completely appalled at the idea, and they all go out after they've been able to understand it, hear the lecture, and then come up and touch them if they want to. Um, it really changes them and affects them in such a way that, you know, I get all these cards, letters, and people that contact me afterwards and tell me that it also really made them have a different understanding of the way they deal with their own mortality and their family, and being able to talk about it. And
Yeah.
some people have used my lectures as a way to break the ice when it's uncomfortable. It's kind of odd sometimes to say, so I want to talk about my funeral, or I
Let's
want to
talk
talk
about my will.
how,
Let's talk about death.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a way for them to say, I saw this lecture, and how they do these art pieces and this and that, and people start to talk about it. And then it's a way also to find out, because this was another thing, people wanted to find out what their loved ones' preferences were, and they didn't feel comfortable asking them. So when you get started on something like, hey, this lady had all these dead people's hair, you know, you can start that out in that way, and then they start to talk, and then you can say as a segue, so how do you want to be remembered? Is there something, you know, what would y'all think of as a family if we made a wall, an art piece, or should we have something made? People do it in a fashion now. Sometimes, you know, they'll make jewelry. You'll see people like, oh, I have this stone or this diamond, and this used to be, you know, my mother, you know. So
Yeah.
there's different memorial pieces now that weren't available before.
I can imagine. And, you know, fashion and Memento Mori and funeral customs, they do go hand in hand. I mean, there is mourning fashion, you know, it's just gotten very boring in our modern days. So it's kind of cool to see some of these things coming back in, really. And I love that people use it as a icebreaker. I just think that's really great. People could use your topic.
Yeah, and the art is really beautiful. The Dance of Death art, and even what they call the vanities, that's, you know, more still life. There's just gorgeous works out there. It's really, it's really pretty.
Now, did you have more that you wanted to talk about today regarding the Dance of Death, or did you cover that enough earlier? I didn't know whether I should ask about it more, because that really intrigued me.
It's interesting. There's so much of it that people don't realize, because
I wasn't aware.
It's just not the paintings, which are really, they're interesting. Some of them are funny, you know. Some of them, the people that did it had a real sense of humor. So some of them, you know, they did that on purpose, because at times when there's mass death, it is so heavy, and unfortunately we're feeling that in the world today. Unlike our lifetime hasn't been. I know that the flu in 1918, it happened, but for most of us, we weren't alive in 1918. So this is our wake up call in our lifetime. And it's, you know, it's not anything funny about it, but sometimes, you know, just a little levity.
Humor's a great coping mechanism, and I have noticed that even in the Puritan headstones, they have these almost comical, like, skeletons that are jabbing people. They got little things to poke you with, like, "Ooh, you're gonna die," you know. And I think you kind of need that. I mean, yes, humor for me is definitely a coping mechanism for everything. And then, like, now, some days I get so overwhelmed by the news, I have to look at the funny things about people making jokes about quarantine or this or that, and I just need a good laugh. I mean, it just helps me move through the feelings and deal with it all. So I think that's great.
Well, and you have to think, they didn't have, like, now we're doing your show, and that's wonderful, but they didn't have that. So, you know, and they didn't all have the ability to even have the art, but these would be pieces that you would see. There would be plays done about it, so they would be plastered, you know, on walls and different things, so people could see these art. And then, of course, the museums had pieces, and so it was something that everybody got to see and understand and talk about, and, you know, be part of. Again, it was part of their background. Their clocks would be dinging with all this stuff, and people had their own personal wristwatches that would be made with the skeleton, you know, with the skull on there, to remind them that their own time is flying. So
that was one of those now. I think that would sell well. I like skeleton things.
Yeah, and it was huge. And of course, the tattoo art is a whole nother thing, but for as long as that's been going on, Memento Mori has been part of that, because you have so many times a huge proportion of people that have that art done, they're trying to remember somebody,
Yeah.
and a lost loved one, or somebody who's even alive now. But you have a lot of memorial tattoo art, and the Memento Mori was part of that all along. And so it really has so many different areas in everybody's life that it has touched, that I think that it's just everywhere, and then you almost don't notice it until you start thinking about it, and then you realize, no, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
And so your book is so timely, really. I mean, who knew? But I am very excited about it, as I said earlier. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
just
thank you.
tell us a little more about your book, Forget Me Not, Memento Mori, A World View,
Yeah,
and what can
thank
readers
you.
expect?
Yeah, so and the reason it's kind of a long title, with the subtitle is, Forget Me Not is the title, but then I thought, okay, people need more to
Oh,
understand
I'm
that.
glad you
So
clarified. Yeah.
yeah, and so I did Memento Mori, A Worldview. So with my, I just love, again, the research, the history, and also with my background as a minister, I have studied so many religions for so many years, and I can definitely tell you that if you took out all the verbiage and you just laid out the beliefs, they're very much the same story. You might have, different words for, who they worship or different things, but their practice and their deep love of who they're remembering is the same. It's the same. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to make sure that weaves all through this book, and really is the heart of the book, is that it's all the belief systems and the burial practices from around the world and from all the major religions. I do have, there's a lot of different religions in there, but there's so many different religions, you can't cover all of them.
Yeah.
But so it covers the major ones that people would know about. And then, of course, there's a chapter, of course, on the jewelry, the hair art, grave rubbings,
Yeah.
the subgenre of the dance of death, and that sort of thing. Then I have chapter on funeral, the last ride, I call it. And that's the funeral carriages throughout history, which some are just they're their own work of art. They're absolutely magnificent. And I know you've been also to the funerary museum in Houston. And it's got a lot of these carriages and pieces in there that people can go and visit. And I urge them to, because it's just gorgeous to see them in person.
Yeah, I went down to see the funeral carriage for Jefferson Davis down in Biloxi, Mississippi, and that one is really grand. But yeah, it is. I love those with the glass, the pulled by horses, and then they have black ostrich feathers, and just they're very. And even in my little town here, our memorial park that's used, it's in regular use. It's a modern memorial park. They have an antique hearse. It's really gorgeous, a black one there that you can see. So those old ones, I love those. Those are, yeah, you're right. That is a really fascinating subgenre.
Beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yeah, so it is, and you have these beautiful carriages that used to be pulled by horses, all sorts, plain to otherwise, and then of course I can't have a collection, right, without some of the pieces. So I have some hand blown glass vases that fit on the carriages, and then of course I have some horsehair filled blankets that they used to put across people's legs in the cold winter when they were going to the funeral, from that, and some of the funerary, flags and things that were on there. A lot of people don't know, when you brought up hearses, that some of them they were equipped with their own little record player, if you will, their own little, and so you could have music graveside with them. And that goes back a long way. It's amazing. So there's actually a pretty sizable chapter with all of that. And then I have funeral food, of course you have that, and traditions. And so, even still today, people will hand out funeral cookies. And but they used to be made literally on the person. They would take some of that, they would take the batter, if you will,
the dough or whatever,
the dough, and they would roll it on the chest of the deceased, so that they would
Wow.
ingest a little bit of that person. And
Whew.
while they don't do that, some people, around the world, they do have still some customs that are interesting
Yeah.
to that degree. But these days it's more processed, and you just have a memorial cookie with somebody's name on it, or a little ribbon or something like that.
Wow.
And then I have the strange burials. There's a
Mhm.
lot of them that are,
Sounds up my
anything from
alley.
something that's, yeah, right up your alley. You're gonna like that chapter,
Yeah.
because there's some strange ones. There's been some places that I traveled and to vampire and witch graves, and those are
Uh-huh.
treated in certain ways.
Oh yeah.
And so that's really something. And then you had the contraptions that were
Yeah.
made to keep grave robbers out, and some of those are
Those
pretty
are
dangerous just
amazing.
to set up.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Um,
I was wondering if they just
and
went off by mistake, like that exploding coffins, some of those. I'm like, I wonder how often, someone buried it and then just how well was that thing made? Something chews through it and pow. I don't know.
yeah, exactly. And then you had the people, being buried alive is actually a thing. I
Oh,
mean, that happened,
mhm.
unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so there were a lot of contraptions made
Mm.
for people, who would be like me. I would be one of them who
Me
I'm not
too.
thrilled with
Oh
the whole
yeah.
process. I would just
Pretty
like,
scary. Hmm.
I'm more wanting to ascend instead of being buried.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm
That
hoping for
sounds
that.
good.
But
Beam me up.
we'll
One to
see.
beam up.
Beam me up. And also, of course, I have to have an etched in stone chapter for the carvers, and it's not just going to be about my grandfather.
Yeah, he
There
gets
were
his
some
own
really
book
beautiful
later, so
carvers.
you know.
Yeah. So that's part of that. And last wishes.
Oh,
There's been some really unusual and unique goodbyes and burials, customs and strange
ah,
goodbyes, if you will, that people have done.
what a great
Um,
idea.
and yeah, and so there's that. And also, oh, you can see my big white dog in the background.
Oh,
Sorry. See, when we're working at home,
oh
say hi,
yeah.
buddy.
That's right,
Hey,
hi
buddy.
buddy.
He's a Great Pyrenees. Anyway, so you have that, and then you have the people. There's a section now, because I wanted to touch on how people today can be buried, like we said earlier. I touched on, you could be your own jewelry, you could be a gem. You don't
Yeah.
have to be a diamond. There's different gems. There's different ways
Mm-hmm.
they can do that.
Yeah.
But you can be buried and become a tree. You can
Yep.
be shot up into space. You
Mm-hmm.
can do so many things. And also, even on a more practical situation, there are a lot of natural burials. There's more and more places,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people don't they want it to be more as close as possible as they can to how it used to be, and to have their family be part of it. And you will have these coffins that are made, that are for a more natural burial, and
Yeah.
they will be able to decorate that you even have the grandchildren taking part, and children,
Oh, nice.
and
I like
adults,
that.
not just the kids, that they'll color and paint and do all these
Mm-hmm.
different engravings on the casket while the people are still alive sometimes, so that it can all be part of it, and it takes out a little bit of the sting, if that's possible, to
Yeah.
the burial. Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of coffins that actually disintegrate over time, because that's been an
Yeah.
issue, especially in places where there's a lot of flooding. If you've got this airtight thing, you've essentially got an air pocket. These coffins just pop up, and it can be a real problem. But if they notice that in the paupers section, where they couldn't afford that and they had just wooden caskets, well, those had fallen apart, and so they weren't popping up, and they stayed essentially buried in the same spot. So anyway, didn't mean
Yeah.
that whole thing is just really something to think about. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to it. So it's a big book,
Hmm.
and
Well, it'll be
it's one
great.
that I'm just having to stop writing. I'm just having to quit, because otherwise it just keeps growing. So I'm just going
Oh
to stop.
yes.
And it's going to be out Friday, October 2nd. I gave myself a date. So it'll be out on Amazon on that day, because
Woohoo.
if I don't, I'll just keep adding things. So it's time
Oh
to stop
yeah.
and put it out there. Yeah.
That is the
So
thing
so for
about
that.
research. It's just there's always just that next article or that next archive or that next
Yeah.
little tidbit you might find, that next great book. But yeah, you've got so
Yeah.
much on here. Think sequel now, you've got so much
I
going
think,
on. This is going to be good.
yeah.
I'm excited for your
Yeah.
book, and we'll have you on
Oh, thank
again
you.
to promote it. I'm really excited. And it's coming out, you said October 2nd?
Yes, Friday, October 2nd. That's it. That's the day it's coming out. So it's going to be
Woohoo!
finished long before that, you know, because
Hmm.
that's got to happen.
Yeah, I wanna review it. Oh, that is gonna be so great. Okay, so unless there's some aspect I left out here, I just want to make sure that we do give you a chance to tell all our viewers how they can keep up with Teal Gray and all the Memento Mori stuff. Of course, I am going to link to everything down below, but still, just tell us a little more so those are listening.
Yeah, you can reach me on Facebook, Pinterest. The website is tealgraysmementomori.com. Same for Facebook. And so, you know, there's a lot of Teal Gray out there. So I have some other shows and some other things that are coming out. So when you put Teal Gray in or Teal Gray Worldwide, they'll all come out. But if you put in the Teal Gray Memento Mori, it'll take you right to that. So, and you mentioned the Lavender Crow products, which is my
Yep.
company. I take holy water, salt, bits of earth, all sorts of the flowers, different things from all of my world travels, and I blend those into protective sprays and body lotions, candles, bubble baths. I mean, you have a lot of the products
I
that
do. I
you've tried
love
out.
your stuff, and so does Larry. Yeah, it's
I'm
great.
glad.
I love all your stuff, and I love it when I do, when I actually can travel. I actually take your spray with me so I can spray the different hotel rooms and especially, cruise cabins, places you're staying, because so many people have stayed there, and it's really nice
Yeah.
to be able to do that. So I love that.
Yeah.
Love your products.
Well, thank you. Yeah, people use that because it doesn't banish anything, if you will, but it does clear out negative energy so that the positive energy can flow there, and it doesn't hurt anybody, spirits or otherwise, but it will move anything out of your way that's there, and create a clean, calm space.
And make it smell all nice. It's just very nice.
Yeah,
It
I've
just
got 5
clears it up.
different scents now, 5 different
Oh
lines.
yeah, that's
So
right. Yeah. I love it. I
yeah.
love that. Well, thank you so much for being. Now, I think it's perfect that this is the first time I've done a podcast that's going to be a video podcast on YouTube. And so it's only perfect, since you're the person who got me into podcasting to begin with. It's perfect that you are my first guest. I'm just so excited. And everybody, you've got to check Teal Gray out. As I told you, that she's got a lot going on, and this was just the tip of the iceberg. So thanks. And I really look forward to having you on the show again sometime.
Thank you. I'd love it. And it's a big compliment for me because you've also got a lot of body of work out there. And I'm very proud of you. I'm always rooting you on. So I'm excited to be on here, and wish you great luck.
Thank you.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I have this fake crab. This wooden crab, and I have to put it on the computer to keep the cat from jumping off her window onto my keyboard.
Oh, how funny.
I know, it looks so silly, but that's what I do. Okay, yeah, just get it all. I know I have to make sure that my glasses don't go like that, like,
Okay.
Yeah, that's much better. I like it. And that old ceiling before.
Yeah.
Now we got a nice background. That warm yellow is good with your skin.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and I usually do the one where I'm with the big painting of the horse because everybody loves that so much, but I don't want to always be interviewed in front of the horse,
Yeah, you mix it up a little bit. Yeah, I'm wearing a different beret.
So, yeah.
What was I going to say? I don't know. I had something. It just went like out of my head. Ah!